Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So, as always, we thank you for attending. And making time out of your Monday to join us, to work together on being better people and being better worshippers of Allah. And our current series is entitled Love and Marriage in Islam. Before we begin tonight's session, there's a couple of housekeeping things. The first one, I think all of you are aware that we had solicited donations for gift packs, hygiene bags for our incarcerated brothers and sisters in Islam. That initiative went very well, and we were able to get donations of both the hygiene items themselves as well as some funds to purchase those items. Those items, along with some kufis and hijabs, have been purchased, and now it's a matter of assembling the bags for distribution. Inshallah ta'ala, that will occur next Monday at 12:20 here in the masjid at 5:15. I'm sorry, I said at 12:20, didn't I? Sorry. So it will happen next week here on 12:20, Monday 12:20 at 5:15 here in the masjid. And there's a sign-up sheet for the sisters if they would like to sign up to participate in assembling those bags for the brothers and sisters in Islam. And may Allah reward all of those who donated, whether they donated funds or they donated actual items for this initiative. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. The second housekeeping matter is lecture guidelines. So last week, unfortunately, I think toward the end, things kind of went off the rails, and we want to prevent that from happening again. We also had a much longer session than we usually would and than we would like. And so, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be following the following guidelines moving forward. First off, inshallah ta'ala, we will try to make brief and concise remarks. We'll try to minimize the lecture itself to about 30 minutes. Then, inshallah ta'ala, thereafter, we'll try to allow ample opportunity for questions. But we humbly request that you please keep your questions clear, short, and to the point. So what we would prefer is if a person just gave their question, if they didn't, for example, preface it with a personal experience, etc. And then last but not least, please reserve any comments until after the program has ended. So a person doesn't have a question, they just want to comment. We'd prefer if that were saved or reserved until the end of the session. So with that said, tonight, inshallah ta'ala, after last week's introduction, we want to talk about getting married. And it is my hope that in the time allotted, we'll be able to cover this topic in its entirety. If not, next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll complete the subject again. Want to make the remarks, want to have a limit to the time that we spend talking, give you an opportunity to ask questions, etc., and then close out at a decent hour. So the first thing, basically what I have is about 10 or 11 advices to those who are seeking to get married. Doesn't matter if they are young and inexperienced, they've never been married before, or they have some experience and are ready to give it another try. I have about, as I said, 10 to 11 advices for those who are seeking to get married.
They invited me. No, I'm one of the mods for that too.
So the first advice is know yourself. So brothers and sisters, if you want to get married, begin by doing honest, deep introspection and serious self-contemplation. Acknowledge your flaws that may make you unmarriable or may give potential suitors pause or give them cause for concern. Seek input and brutally honest feedback from the people closest to you. those who know you best and possess intimate knowledge of your flaws and foibles. And this includes your parents, your siblings, your other relatives, your close friends, even your co-workers and classmates, people who interact with you closely and have intimate knowledge of who you are, what makes you tick. Ask those people honestly their honest opinion of you and any flaws or any shortcomings you may have that may affect your ability to get married. It's important for us, brothers and sisters, to be self-aware, to know ourselves, to know our reality. And there is a very famous athar in which it is mentioned that Umar bin Abd'Llah, very pious, so pious that he was a leader of the Muslims, obviously, in the early period of Islam. He was so pious and so committed that some people have dubbed him the fifth rightly guided caliph, Umar bin Abd'Llah. He had a son, and his son had gone off to some other land, and in that land he purchased a ring for 1,000 dirham, 1,000 pieces of silver. So this information, it reached Umar bin Abd'Llah. So when it reached him, he didn't like that. He didn't feel it was appropriate. So he wrote to his son and he said, إنه قد بلغني أنك اشتريت خاتما بألف درهم فبعه وأطعم منه ألف جائع واشتري خاتما من حديد بدرهم واكتب عليه رحم الله امرأ عرف قدر نفسه. So he wrote a note to him, a letter to him, instructing him, saying, it has reached me that you purchased a ring for 1,000 dirham. Sell it. I order you to sell it and use the proceeds to feed 1,000 hungry people. Then I want you to purchase an iron ring, a ring made from iron, bidirham, for one silver piece. Instead of buying a ring for $1,000, I want you to buy a ring that's worth $1. And I want you to have an inscription engraved on it, which reads, may Allah show mercy to the person who knows his individual status and personal limitations. Brothers and sisters, if we know ourselves, this will enable us to know exactly what we bring to a relationship. What wants and needs of a potential spouse we can provide. It also will enable us to know what we want and what we need out of a relationship. It will also, if we really know ourselves and really understand ourselves, it makes us better equipped to communicate what our wants and needs are to a potential spouse, and also to recognize those qualities in him or her. So the better you know yourself, the better you are able to determine who you're compatible with and also who's compatible with you, and recognize those who are from those who aren't. The second advice is no marriage. Know yourself, no marriage. Brothers and sisters, I think we all would agree that you can't do something satisfactorily, let alone well, if you don't know anything about it. And this includes marriage. You can't do marriage well if you don't know anything about marriage or what marriage is supposed to look like in Islam. So it's important for us to learn what it means to be married, what is expected of us as husbands and what is expected of us as wives. And if we're getting married, we need to acquaint ourselves with all the rules, all the regulations, all the do's and don'ts, all the requirements and conditions related to getting married and marriage itself. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ meant when he said in the hadith collected by Ibn Majah on the authority of Anas, he said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim. He said, seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. What does the Prophet mean? Does he mean that you have to have, every Muslim has to have encyclopedic knowledge of every aspect of Islam? No. But what the Prophet is saying, it's obligatory upon every Muslim who is going to engage in something Islamic. Engage in something that Islam has given a ruling to it, has given guidelines to it, has assigned prerequisites to it. If they have to engage in that, like a salat, or they want to engage in it, like marriage, then they have to know what that entails from an Islamic perspective. They have to seek that knowledge. They have to know it. They just can't embark on it and not know what does Islam say about marriage, and what are the prerequisites of marriage, and the conditions, etc., and so on. So know marriage. We have to learn what it means to be married in Islam. But number 3 from the advices, prepare yourself. So you know yourself, you know marriage, now you need to prepare yourself for marriage. Now that you know yourself and you know what being married in Islam entails, what it requires, now you're ready to go to work on yourself and begin making the necessary self-improvements and going down the list of prerequisites for marriage in preparation for marriage. So you got that checklist. This is what it takes. This is what it requires. And you start what? Checking off that list. طيب. You start checking off that list, and it's important for us not to wait until we get married to address whatever issues we have. Our selfish ways, our violent temper, our abusive language, our poor communication skills, our finances, our mental and physical health, etc. What we can't do, brothers and sisters, is fool ourselves into believing that we can go into a marriage with all of this baggage, and then miraculously, the day we get married, by Allah's will, we're just going to change into a better human being without putting in any effort whatsoever. We don't have to do anything. We'll get married, and by virtue of being married, Allah will make us what? Will make us transform and change overnight. In our religion, we're taught that when we want something, we want to bring something about, we want to achieve a desired objective, we're required to do 2 things. The first thing, al-akhdh bil-asbab. We have to employ the legal and appropriate means to achieve that objective. Person wants to have children. They have to get married. That's one of the legal and appropriate means. Person wants to be able to feed and clothe themselves. They have to go what? Look for a job. We have to do that. And then the second thing we have to do is li'timad al-Allahi li jalb al-masalih wa daf al-madar. We have to put our trust in Allah, rely upon Allah to bring about the benefit, to repel the harm that we want to avoid, and to make the means effective. Make the means something which will bring about the desired result. And so these are the 2 things. We can't do one without the other. We can't just depend totally on ourselves. I'm going to make this happen. Nor can we sit back and do nothing and just wait for Allah to make it happen. طيب, At-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah ta'ala, has collected the famous hadith on the authority of Anas, in which a Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, he said, O Messenger of Allah, I have a she-camel. Should I let it loose and put my trust in Allah? Or should I tie up my camel and put my trust in Allah? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "I'qilha wa tawakkal." He said, tie it up and put your trust in Allah, which means we have to do our part and try to prepare ourselves for marriage and then rely on Allah for the rest of that. But ثم بعد ذلك, we said, guys, help me remember, because I'm getting old, I don't remember. We said the first thing is what? Know yourself. Second one? No marriage. Number 3? Prepare yourself. But number 4, have a guardian. Ahmed, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah have collected the hadith from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, La nikaha bila wali, or illa bi waliyin. He said, La nikah illa bi waliyin. He said, marriage without a guardian is invalid. Ibn Majah has a version of the hadith from Aisha, in which the Prophet added the words, was sultan waliyu man la waliya lah. And the ruler is the guardian of the one who has none. And the ruler is the guardian of the one who has none. So here, brothers and sisters, the Prophet made it abundantly clear that a woman cannot marry herself, and the marriage of a woman without representation is invalid. A woman can't marry herself, and the marriage of a woman without representation is invalid. But it's important for us to understand, brothers and sisters, because in this day and age, it's poorly understood what the role of the guardian, it's misunderstood, or the role of the guardian is misunderstood. A guardian is more than a formality of the proceedings. Just basically, the proceedings have certain formalities, boxes you have to check, and one of them is having a wali. The guardian is more than that. The guardian is also more than what? A rubber stamp. The guardian is appointed to help with vetting and to help ensure that the decision to accept or reject a potential candidate is not an emotional decision. It's not a purely emotional decision. The guardian is there to make sure that it's a reasoned and rational decision. The guardian is also appointed to protect a Muslim woman's best interest and to prevent her from being taken for a ride. And this is why it is critical that the wali be a part of the process from the very beginning and not brought in at the end to merely sign off. And this is one of the problems, is that women will do all of the legwork. They'll do everything that a wali is supposed to do. And then once they've made up their mind, they go and try to find someone who will get them married, who will be their representation, who will be their representative. And so the wali then, in that case, he's just a rubber stamp. He's just, I need you to get this done. And if it weren't for the fact that I have to do it, or I have to incorporate you to get this done, I wouldn't even include you. And so that's not the purpose of the wali. The wali is supposed to help, as we said, with vetting. He's supposed to help prevent the decision from being an emotional one. He's there to protect and preserve the woman's best interest, and so on. طيب. Now, if you notice, we said the whole time that the Prophet is saying that the marriage of a woman without a wali is invalid, and that a woman can't marry herself. And so what this indicates is that a young man who's seeking to get married, he doesn't need a wali. He doesn't need representation to get married, but that doesn't mean that he shouldn't have someone wise and experienced standing in his corner, advising him and offering him good counsel. And that means that even a young man needs to have someone in his corner who will do what? Who will give him that advice, give him that good counsel. And so he doesn't necessarily need a wali, but every person, male or female, needs somebody in their corner giving them good advice and helping them make good, rational, reasoned decisions, and not purely emotional decisions to accept or reject. Let's review again. First one, know yourself. Second one, no marriage. Number 3, prepare yourself. Number 4, have a guardian. Number 5, it's important for us as we go through this process of trying to get married to make dua. To make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to supplicate, to ask Allah to make this process easy for us, to help us find a suitable and pious husband or wife, and to also help us to shore up some of our shortcomings and some of our flaws that may make us unmarriable, or at least something which makes a lot of people say, next, we don't want to be that person, right? And so we ask Allah to help us to be better people and worthy of what? A good spouse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the importance of us asking Him for our needs, regardless of what those needs are. That He expects us to ask Him for those needs. So for example, He says in Surah Ghafir, the 40th surah, the 40th chapter, verse number 60. He says, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ أُدْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. He says, and your Lord says, call upon me, I will answer your supplication. Those who arrogantly refuse to worship me will enter hell humiliated. Just want you to contemplate this verse for a second. Allah says, call upon me. This is a command. He's ordering us to call upon Him. And He's making it in the process an act of worship. So when we call upon Allah asking for our needs, there's no benefit that Allah gets from us calling upon Him. Nothing. He gains from that. We're the ones who are going to gain. We're calling upon Him for our needs. He makes an act of worship for which we'll be rewarded for. And then He says that if we don't do this, we're arrogant. It's a sign of our own arrogance if we don't ask Allah. And a person says, okay, well, to what extent do we ask Allah? There's a hadith collected by Tirmidhi on the authority of Anas, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and the hadith was authenticated by Al-Imam Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَلْيَسْأَلْ أَحَدُكُمْ رَبَّهُ حَاجَتَهُ كُلَّهَا حَتَّى يَسْأَلَهُ شِسْعَ نَعْلِهِ إِذٍ قَطَعَ. He said in this hadith, he said, let one of you ask his Lord for all of his needs, even for the strap of his sandal if it breaks. Even the strap of his sandal if it breaks, ask Allah. And another version of the hadith from Thabit al-Bunani says, حَتَّى يَسْأَلُهُ الْمِلْحِ. He should ask his Lord even for salt in his food. These are things that generally we can provide for ourselves. Allah has given us the ability to provide it for ourselves, but even then, we should ask Allah. If we should ask Allah for these things, what is the message in the ayah and the hadith? Ask Allah for all of your needs, no matter how simple, no matter how trivial you think they are. Ask Him for all of your needs, especially, and that includes a good spouse. Ask Allah for that. Don't think I can go it alone, I'll figure it out, I'll find somebody good. Ask Allah for that. The next advice is to get good advice. The next advice is to get good advice. We mentioned previously in one of the previous sessions, we mentioned the famous hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim from Fatima bin Qais, who she narrated that she was proposed to by two people. One of them Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, and the other one Abu Jahm. So she went to the Prophet ﷺ to help her decide, seeking his what? His counsel, his good advice on which one of them he should marry. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أما معاوية فسؤلوك لا مال له وأما أبو جهم فلا يضع عصاه عن عتيقه انكحي أسامة bin Zayd. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gave her advice and he said, as for Muawiyah, he is not financially capable and has no monetary means. And as for Abu Jahm, he never takes his staff off of his shoulder. Marry Usama bin Zayd instead. So notice here, Fatima, rather than just choose for herself, she had two proposals. She could just choose for herself. I like him better, he's more handsome, he comes from a better family. Whatever it was, she could just choose for herself. Rather than do that, she went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, what do you think? Sought his advice. Sought advice from the most knowledgeable, wise, and experienced person she knew, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When one of us wants to get married, we should do the same thing, and as we said previously, don't go it alone. And it has been famously said, مَا خَابَ مَنِ اسْتَشَارَ. The one who seeks advice will never be disappointed by his decision. You seek advice from knowledgeable people, smart people, wise people, they'll give you good advice, and if you follow their advice, you'll never be what? You'll never be disappointed by your decision. Let's review up to this point. We said the first one was know yourself. Number two, no marriage. Number 3, prepare yourself. Number 4, guardian. Number 5, make dua. Number 6, good advice. But number 7, do your homework. Unfortunately, brothers and sisters, we live in a time in which people who are seeking marriage, they engage in deceit. And what you see is oftentimes not what you get. And sometimes this happens by omission. Person doesn't say something that's a lie, but they omit. They fail to mention certain things that if you knew them, it would impact your decision. So they what? They omit. They just don't mention certain things. They fail to mention certain things. They neglect to mention certain things. And sometimes, brothers and sisters, it happens, this deceit occurs through blatant lying. When we get married, do we want to get married or try to find happiness through marriage via trial and error? Is that what we want to do? Raise your hand if you want to get married 12 times before you find the right person. Nobody wants to do that. When we get married, we want to get it right the first time. And it's difficult and next to impossible to do that, to get it right the first time, if you don't have a true representation and an accurate impression of a potential spouse. If that person has omitted, if that person has lied, if you don't have the correct and accurate picture of who they are. And so our religion, it teaches us to do what? To protect ourselves. And to protect ourselves from harm to the best of our ability. Protect ourselves from someone getting over on us, for lack of a better word. As the Prophet said in the hadith, La darar wa la dirar. He said there's no self-harm, there should be no harming of self, nor harming of others. Don't put yourself in harm's way, is what the Prophet is saying. Which means what? I need to make sure that this person is who they say they are. It's also a religion. Our religion is a religion of taking precautions. As the Prophet said, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَخُذُوا حِذْرَكُمْ, and take your precautions. So we have to protect ourselves and proceed with caution by doing some homework and finding out as much accurate information about a potential spouse as we can. And this is also evidenced by the hadith we just mentioned of Fatima bint Qais. She came and said, Abu Jahm offered me and Muawiyah proposed. What can you tell me about that? I'm trying to do my homework, make an educated decision. And the Prophet told her. So it's important to do our homework and to find out as much as we can about a potential spouse so we make an educated decision. Like the next advice, number 8, get to know your potential spouse. And I know you might say, well, if you do your homework, get to know them. No, get to know them more in depth, more personally, as best as you can. Because the better you know them, the better you will be able to be a good spouse for them by fulfilling their wants and their needs. You will also know if you are a suitable spouse for them because you'll know what their wants and needs are and whether or not you can fulfill those or provide those. Suppose, for example, that there's a sister who says, I want to marry someone who will give me a very comfortable lifestyle. Anything wrong with that? Anything wrong with that? I want a very comfortable lifestyle. I don't want to ever have to worry about money. Never want money to be what? A worry, a care, or a concern. I never want to be on a budget. Go to the store, for example, and there are things that I want or need. They're not exorbitantly expensive. Average price things. I go to start grabbing things and put them in the cart and I'm told, hey, don't put that in the cart. We can't afford that. Got to put that back. We can't afford that this time around, whatever. Woman says, I don't want that. I don't want to live that life. I want to be able to go to the store and put things in the cart and not have to worry about that. So do you think that that's something that a potential husband needs to know? He should know that about her? Especially if that's not him. If he can't at that time and doesn't expect, given his education, his employment or his occupation, he doesn't expect to be comfortable. There's going to be what? There's going to be some peaks and valleys from a financial perspective. He needs to know that. And he needs to know that he can't what? He can't give that to her. And even if he likes her a lot and he thinks she's great and they're so compatible and they have a lot of things in common, if he knows that this is a want, a deal breaker for her that I can't provide, he needs to know that so he can do what? So he can let her find someone who can fulfill that need or that want for her. Save himself the potential rejection once she realizes that he's not that person. Save himself potential embarrassment. Save himself and her potential misery. And so it's important for you to get to know your potential spouse to the point where you can say, yeah, what this person wants and needs, I can fulfill that. I can meet that. Or not. And then make an educated decision based upon that. So we reached 8. And we're doing pretty good, actually. All right. We have 8. I have about 4 more, and I can do them quickly. Let's go for about 5 more minutes, and then we'll stop and open for questions. All right? But let's review really quickly, though. First one was? Know yourself. No marriage. Prepare yourself. Guardian. Dua. Good advice. Do your homework. Get to know your potential spouse. Perfect. Mumtaz. Play. Next one. I've got somebody in my sights. And I'm at number 8. I know them. And I really think that what they need and what they want, I'm it. And vice versa. What you say? Khalas, come sit here, brother. Come sit here, brother. Yeah, at that point you need to pray al-istikhara. You need to pray al-istikhara, and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you, because He has that foreknowledge that we don't have, that foreknowledge of the future. He knows everything. He knows what we can't see. He knows the things that are around the corner that we can't see. He knows the red flags that we missed. He knows all of that. And so we ask Allah to choose for us, or to help us know what is the right choice. We make this istikhara. And we mentioned previously, famously it's been said, Ma khaba man istashara. The person who seeks counsel will not be disappointed by the decision he makes. The rest of it says, Wa ma nadima man istikhara. And the one who makes istikhara and follows the decision that Allah has guided him to will not have any regrets. They'll have no regrets whatsoever. And as famously narrated from Anas ibn Yes, it is Anas, I'm sorry. Anas narrates in the hadith collected by An-Nasai. Anas narrates in the hadith collected by An-Nasai that when Zainab, when her iddah expired, the Prophet sent someone to ask for her hand in marriage. And she said, this is the Prophet. This is the Messenger of Allah. This is the one who's the most eligible bachelor, right? He sends word that he's interested in having her hand. And she said, radiyallahu anha, ma ana bisani'atin shay'an hatta asta'mira rabbi فقامت إلى مسجدها ونزل القرآن. So she said, I will not do anything. I will not make a decision until I consult my Lord. So she went to pray, and Allah revealed verses from what? From the Quran. Basically marrying her to the Prophet in the Quran, subhanAllah. طيب. The next one is know the haram, avoid the haram. So know what you're not allowed to do in the course of trying to get married, and avoid those things. Like al-khalwa, being alone with a potential spouse. Showing something to your spouse of your person which they're not allowed to see. Whether that be in person or through pictures. Another ilal muharram, looking at something of your potential spouse which you're not supposed to look at. Al-kadib, lying. Al-khadi'ah, being deceitful. We talked about that previously. Basically saying things that you know are not true. Embellishing things about yourself. Right? Basically being deceitful. Avoid all these things. These things are haram. Know what is haram. And avoid the Avoid the haram. Why? Because we want Allah's blessings. And if we don't go about things the right way, then the marriage will be deprived of Allah's blessings. But the next one, set realistic expectations. There's no such thing as a perfect spouse. And our quest for perfection in imperfect humans will end in disappointment. Person keeps saying, no, 95% of what I want, but, and they keep looking for perfection. Ultimately, that quest is going to end in what? Disappointment, because you're never going to find it. You'll never find it. As the Prophet said in the hadith, kullu ibni Adam khata. Every human being has what? Faults, flaws, idiosyncrasies. There's no such thing as a perfect human being. We're not angels. So do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You guys know what that means? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That you keep passing on the good because you're looking for the perfect, which you'll never find. So end up empty-handed. You guys see that? Last but not least from the advices, this is number 11. Learn from previous mistakes. That means if you've been looking before or you looked before and you made mistakes,
I think it's 12.
Really, I think it's 11. We'll go through it again. We'll go through it. And if I'm wrong, I'll have a piece of candy for you or something from the office. Huh? 12. I miscounted? You sure?
Yes, it's 12, bro.
All right, we're going to see. I got like 2-3 pieces of candy I got to give out if I'm wrong. All right, we're going to see. We're going to count them out together. So the last one is learn from previous mistakes, right? So basically, you've never been married before, but you've tried. And you made mistakes in the course of it. Learn from those mistakes. Don't repeat those mistakes. You've been married. And now you're going to get married again. You realize when I got married the first time, and in that relationship, I made mistake X, Y, and Z. So I'm not going to repeat those mistakes. I'm not going to do those things again. Because the Prophet said in the hadith, Al-mu'min la yuldaq min juhrin, la yuldaq min juhrin marratain, or juhrin wahidin marratain. He said, a believer is not stung by the same hole twice. Right? Fool me once, shame on her. You fool me twice, shame on me. So I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. If I made it the first time, I won't make it the second time around. So these are, I think they're 11. Some people say they're 12. We're getting ready to find out. These are 11 or 12 advices for the person who's going to get married. If you notice, we didn't talk about nuts and bolts. Because that's something we can pick up any book of fiqh and it'll tell us these are the prerequisites. We want to talk about these things. Give these practical advices that complement the rules and the nuts and bolts in the books of fiqh. If you take those which are readily available, and you take this and put it together, inshallah ta'ala will help us all be successful in our quest to find a good spouse. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we're not married, make us from those who find someone who will make us happy. And those of us who are married, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us happiness in our relationships. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So let's count them out. First one. Number 2. I'm wrong. I see it right now. I see my mistake. All right, so I got how many pieces of candy? 3. Okay, I got it. I'll pay up. So number 3 was prepare. Prepare yourself. Number 4, have a guardian. Number 5, make dua. Number 6, good advice. Number 7, get to know your potential spouse. Do your homework. Do your homework. Number 8, get to know your potential spouse. Number 9, istikhara. 10, know the haram, avoid the haram. 11, realistic expectations. And number 12, learn from the previous mistakes. And with that, we bring today's session to a close. If there are any questions, comments, or not comments, but if there are any questions, we'll spend some time taking those. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Abd'Llah, do you want to do the questions from Clubhouse? Do you want them to come up, or do you want them to send them in the back channel?
They can come up, but just remember what we said at the outset. Please keep your questions clear, short, and to the point. Sometimes, I don't want to. Sometimes people will give their personal experience as a preface to the question. I'm just asking that we elide the personal experience, get right to the question at hand, unless somehow, some way, the personal experience, the question can't be understood without the experience, which in most cases that's not the case. So we can start. We can take one from Clubhouse, one from the in-person audience, unless there are no questions here. تفضل Abu Bakr, go ahead.
Suppose the sister that you want to marry wears niqab.
Hey.
Can you see her before?
Absolutely. The Prophet said in the hadith, there are two hadith related to this. The first one is the hadith of Jabir, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if one of you is interested in marriage and he's able to see that which will invite him to marry that sister, فَلْيَفْعَلْ, then let him do that. And Jabir, he mentioned that he went to a place where women typically go to do their work. And when they do their work, obviously off in this place, they would do what? They would roll up their sleeves. Okay? They would take their headpieces and maybe they're down here. They would push them back, right? They would roll up their lower garments slightly to their shin area so they could do their work. And so in this way, he was able to get an idea of the build, of the shape, of the appearance of the woman that he was interested in marrying. There's another hadith where a man from the Ansar, he said that he had basically reached an agreement with the family of a sister from the Ansar. And the Prophet said, "Did you look at her?" He said, "No." He said, "Go and look at her, because there's something in the eyes of the Ansari women. Basically, make sure that this woman is going to be attractive to you." So there's two hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was emphatic about a man seeing his potential spouse. And so it's perfectly permissible, even if the sister wears a face veil, for her to lift that veil and to let him see her face. Yeah, it's perfectly permissible. Yeah.
Afwan, Abdullah, a question came in along the same lines as the brother's question. It's about the hijabi sisters and the niqabi sisters that they are able to, they're able to see the brother. Generally, they're seeing his face and they're seeing, sometimes they're seeing his shape, by seeing what he's wearing.
Mm-hmm.
But with the hijabi sister, many of them, with the pictures, they'll just show like a face shot, but they won't show like a full shot of them standing.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the niqabi sister, she's doing all the introduction, or you're talking with the wali, and you just have the niqabi shot, but you don't see their face. And so he said that some time passes, of communication, and then finally you see the sister, either her face or you see her standing, and it's not something that you're pleased with.
Mm-hmm.
So what should be happening in these situations? Should the brother, I guess he wants to know, should he request right away, as soon as there's initial contact, I need to see your face and I need to see a standing shot, or what?
All right, let me say two things. The first hadith, the hadith of Jabir, it mentioned that من استطاع طيب إذا استطاع أن يرى ما يدعوه إلى نكاحها فليفعل. He said in the hadith Jabir, he said, that person who's interested in marrying a woman, if he's able to see of her that which will invite him to marry her, then let him do so. طيب, this, what will invite him, is something that the scholars historically have differed about. There's one camp that says he can see the face and the hands. There's another camp on the opposite end of the spectrum that says he can see the woman in her entirety. That opinion, on the far opposite side of the spectrum, is the opinion of, I want to say it's Ibn Hazm and Al-Zahiriyah. And that opinion is shadh. It's unorthodox, and it's not generally accepted by the scholars of Islam. طيب, the Hanabila, the scholars of the Madhab al-Hanbali, they say that a man can see sab'at a'adha, he can see 7 parts of the woman. He can see her hair, her face, her neck, her 2 arms up to the elbows, her 2 feet up to the shins. Now, whenever there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars, and there are 3 opinions, those 3 opinions are considered the opinions that we have to choose from in light of the evidences. Those are the 3 opinions we have to choose from. We can't now adopt a 4th opinion, because that would be to say that the opinion, these 3 opinions, all of them are wrong. And we know that can't be the case, because the Prophet said in the hadith collected by Muslim, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي على الحق ظاهرين لا يضرهم من خذلهم ولا من خالفهم حتى يأتي أمر الله وهم على ذلك. He said that there will not cease to be a group of a party of my nation, my community, upon the truth, calling to the truth, until the end of what? Time. Meaning there will never be a period where the truth will not be preached, it will not be practiced, it will not be known about. There will never be a time like that. So if we come now in our time and say, none of those opinions is right, there's another middle opinion, if you will, a more moderate opinion. And that opinion is right. That would mean that what? There was a period of time when these 3 opinions were the only opinions and all of them were wrong. You guys see that? So now let's look at the evidence. The first opinion that says, the far extreme opinion that says he can see all of her, as I said, is something which the scholars of Islam generally have rejected. So let's just what? Just X that off. We're left with he can see her face and her hands. Or he can see these what? These 7 body parts. But if we say he can see the face and the hands only, that means there's no difference between him and a man who's not interested in marrying her, because when a woman goes out of her home, what is she allowed to reveal? Her face and hands. There's no difference between him. So there's no miza. There's no advantage for him. Also bear in mind that one of the things that Islam wants to prevent, it wants to prevent a man and a woman getting actually married and then figuring out that what? That they're not physically compatible. Wants that to be known in advance. That's one of the wisdoms behind what? Going to see her, which the Prophet said, go see her. Don't finalize that until you go and see her, because what? There's something in the eyes and you may not like it, and then you'll be hurt and she'll be hurt, her family will be hurt. Avoid all of that. You see that? So that being said, Allah knows best. The strongest opinion is the opinion of the Hanabila. And why? Because everybody has a type. Some men like women who are very thin. Some men like women who are what? They're thick. And he'll be able to tell that without her revealing too much of herself if she reveals these 7 what? These 7 things. You guys see that? So he's allowed to see her hair. He's allowed to see her face and her neck, arms to the elbows, legs or feet to the shins. He's allowed to see that. That's what's correct. Now with that comes to the second part of the question, which is, if a brother gets interested in a sister, should he be allowed to see her immediately? The answer is no. The answer is an emphatic no. Seeing is something that you do when that's the only thing left to do to make what? A decision. And what a woman should not do is what? Is reveal herself to someone who hasn't what? Who hasn't really committed himself in terms of being interested in her. What that would mean is that every time a man expresses interest, she's what? Revealing herself, and then that would contradict the whole purpose of what? Hijab. So it should only be someone who, man, if she's looking right, it's over. You see that? That it should be somebody who, that's all I need to push me over what? Over the threshold. That's where it should be at. And if it's before that, if you have certain brothers who are like, well, I need to see you first. Send me a picture. Just move past him to the next person who's serious and who sees you as something other than a physical object. a physical object. That doesn't mean that the physical doesn't matter, but the physical should not be the priority. Why? Because the physical is here today and gone tomorrow. طيب. Any questions from the in-person audience? Tafadali.
Number 6, when you said get to know them.
Uh-huh.
In today's society, you find a lot of people that are interested in each other talking.
Uh-huh.
More. What's the limit on that? What do you advise as far as, I mean, I know, but I mean, it's coming from you. What is your advice on the limit that you would, some of the younger, my children or something like this, what's the limit that you allow for people to talk, to get to know each other? 2 months, 1 month, 1 year?
I don't know if it's necessarily a time limit. What I would say is that some scholars discourage, may even say it's prohibited for them to talk until they reach a certain point in the process.
What's the point?
And even then, it would only be for specific things that it's absolutely necessary or required for them to talk. Some scholars would say that. I personally, I don't necessarily feel that it's prohibited for them to converse, because it's a means for them to get to know each other. But I do understand why scholars say it's discouraged, or they say it's prohibited, because of what they call sadd al-dhari'ah. Because in Islam, what we try to do is not just prohibit, or what Islam does, it doesn't just prohibit the bad thing. It prohibits everything that could what? To lead to the bad thing. So Islam doesn't just prohibit zina. It doesn't just prohibit a zina. It doesn't just prohibit adultery and fornication. It prohibits what? Certain things that could lead to it. Similarly, when people talk and they're trying to get to know each other, it's very easy for that to go what? Sideways. To start out very appropriate and then go to a very inappropriate place. So that being said, what they should do is, if they're going to talk, they should put certain protective measures in place to make sure that it doesn't go sideways. So, for example, they talk and there's a third party who can basically, make sure that the conversation is appropriate. It's G. No, it is likely if they want to. They can also exchange, for example, they can exchange emails, but those emails are what? It's a group email. So there's that one third party that's in the email, in the group or whatever. Same thing if they exchange text. It's a group text with that third party in the text. They definitely will what? Be on their best behavior if there's a third party. But if it's just them, then it's likely to what? To go sideways. So basically, what I would encourage, again, as I said, is that if they want to talk, and they need to talk for 2 months or for 3 months, let them talk for 2 or 3 months. If they need to meet at the boy's parents' house or meet at the girl's parents' house, let them do that until they actually feel like, yeah, I know this person well enough. I know what they're going to need and what I'm going to need from them, and that they can give me what I need and I can give them what they need. That's fine, but they just need to make sure that they put those protective measures in place to keep things from going sideways. But let's go to Clubhouse, and we're probably going to do maybe another 6 minutes or so. Try to finish at about 8:30. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Go ahead, Brother Omar. Jazakallah. I actually have 2 questions. One, I don't know if you spoke about this last week. I missed last week, but I'm curious. Can you give practical advice to the people, to our Muslim brothers and sisters who are not single, who are currently married, in regards to introducing single people to each other? There are a lot of us who don't know how to do the icebreaker, don't know how to approach, don't know how to do the introduction.
Hey.
How can we get other people involved in the game? And second, can you speak to the importance of compatibility outside of the 4 reasons to marry a woman, like especially outside of deen? But can you speak to the importance of compatibility and what we should be looking for? So how do we get introduced to each other by the community, with the community's help, and compatibility?
Wow, the second question is a lot easier than the first one. And the first one, I'd actually have to think about that to give you an educated answer about that. Not educated so much as a thoughtful. Let me put it like that: thoughtful answer for that one.
Can you weave it in next week?
Yeah, I will. I will. I will. I will. I know.
It's bad.
I know.
Let me tell you.
I know. I just want to give a thoughtful answer, and you kind of knocked me off kilter with that one, to be honest with you. So, so let me go with the second one, and we'll try to deal with the first one next week after I give it some thought. But the second one, which is compatibility, we kind of talked about that in some detail last week. And basically we said that compatibility is not necessarily limited to sharing the same likes and dislikes, having similar personalities. But rather we said that compatibility, it encompasses knowing what you yourself are capable of giving someone in a relationship, and finding someone who what you can give, what you're willing to give, what you're able to give, lines up with what they need and what they want. And that's why it's so important for us to get to know ourselves, so we know the reality of what we can give, what we can actually bring and contribute to a relationship, and vice versa, knowing our spouse or potential spouse to know what are their needs, what are their wants, and am I the person, or am I capable of giving them that? And here I just want to emphasize and stress, not just for the people who are interested in getting married, but those who are already married, is that, to me, this is the key to being married and staying married. Is that your spouse is going to, throughout the marriage, communicate to you what their needs are. And sometimes they'll communicate it very explicitly. And sometimes they'll communicate it through their behavior. They'll communicate it when they're not getting what they need by withdrawing, by becoming frustrated, by becoming distant, etc. And what we have to try to do is we have to try to pick up on that and give a darn. We have to care, because we talked about compassion being a critically important feature of marriage. We have to care enough to want to deliver, want to know what the problem is. Where are we falling short? What is it that you need that I'm not giving you? We have to care enough to try to find out what that is. Whether we ask them explicitly or we kind of just explore ourselves and try to, is it this? Is it this? And then once we figure out what it is, we strive and earnest to provide it if it's something that we can provide. I think this is the second problem that we have, is that, okay, I realize what you need, but I'm not interested in providing it. Basically take it or leave it. That attitude destroys marriages. And we gave examples last week of, for example, a husband who has trust issues. And he just needs his wife to make him feel that he can trust her and to feel secure, to quiet his insecurities, to do little things, like when she goes out of the house, to text him every now and again about her whereabouts. Not to sneak off and have phone calls, in another part of the house, making him feel that there's something amiss. Not to do those types of things. And she can do those things, but she refuses. So we gave that example, we gave other examples, and so basically compatibility beyond, like you said, the four things that the Prophet mentioned, is knowing what is it that you need, what is it that you want, and am I the person who's able to give it to you, and vice versa.
I have two questions that came in earlier on. I don't know. I know you said 6 minutes.
Hey.
It's two questions, and I know we don't have time for them. But
Hey.
do you want me to still pose them, or?
Yeah, what I'd like to do, we had some left over from last week. We have the ones from this week, and I'd like to get those answered. And so basically, what we need to do is figure out what's the best way to get those answers. As I said, if it's a separate brief session, just doing the questions rapid fire, we could do that. Or maybe we could open next week with answering the questions, see how far we get, and then if there's time for the talk, we'll give the talk. These are options. We can discuss it offline. I won't do that here. I have one question from the in-person audience. I'm going to take that, and then we'll close, inshallah ta'ala.
Nah, man, we got a couple more that were sent to me in the back channel too. So it'll be good if we can get to those at some point, inshallah.
All right, so we'll make a decision offline, and then we need to let everybody know that's in the room right now, if we can do that somehow.
Okay.
All right.
I'm thinking going for a separate section, inshallah.
All right, just let me know, and we need to let everybody else know. تفضلي.
Okay.
Wa alaikum salam. We're going to take one from the in-person, and from the in-person also, we're going to close. So if you have a question and we didn't get to you, I apologize. Please give that question to Sister Zahida or Brother Ali Sabr, and then we'll get it answered, I promise. Inshallah ta'ala.
No, you can send the question to me on the back channel, inshallah.
About getting to know someone and having a third party.
Hey.
Does it have to be, or is it preferred for the person to be mahram to the female?
Yeah. That would be preferred, but it could be. It could be
someone who's not, or like a Muslim.
It could be, for example, somebody from the boys' family too.
Okay.
As long as you guys aren't going to be alone.
Well, for an example, if I wanted to go with my husband and my friend, and she's meeting an intended person, would that be okay?
Okay, so you're saying, for example, you're going to go to a place and your friend, who's a female, has her intended.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be ideal. Wouldn't be the ideal way to do it. Wouldn't say it's wrong. It wouldn't be the ideal way to do it. I wouldn't say it's wrong though. Okay? Because you wouldn't be alone.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you wouldn't be alone, but it wouldn't be ideal because they're not going to be as keen to make sure it doesn't go sideways as, for example, your brother, right? One of your brothers will probably beat the guy up, right? See that? So that makes sure that he doesn't do that. All right, and with that, we'll bring today's session to a close. Thank you all for coming again. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. بارك الله فيك يا شيخ.